this recorded video about maps is going to go on to the YouTube channels so that we can piggyback the radio shows that are going to be coming up on my show, Carrying Stones and Digging Holes radio show. So we can keep referring back to the maps. So when we refer back to the maps, you'll know exactly what that means. Okay, go ahead. You guys are on. I'm going to mute out.
Well, hi everyone. Let's be
Hello.
here. So what are we looking at, Mike?
The Vatican.
Yeah.
And the Star Fortress right next to it. You can see from the actual border outline how the Vatican City is a citadel.
Yep.
And then this is the Star Fort right next to it. We have some evidence that this castle was built in 300 AD.
Yep. That means way before gunpowder and way before the premise of fortifications as military defense structures began. So way before that premise was in place, according to official history, this fort was built, according to also semi-official history. Well, it looks to me that the book that we found that reference in is way more an authority on these structures than Wikipedia, of course.
I'm not sure if you're able to see the red line.
Yeah, that is the larger city.
That's the larger city of Rome. Yes.
I have old maps showing those that fort in the 15 and 1600s in place, if we're to believe the dating. So those city walls are very are old as well.
I have some old maps of Rome.
Yep. There should be one or two in there with the large city walls.
I have a question while you guys are searching. So I don't know if it was John Levy, but somebody I was watching, and he was showing like, kind of evidence from pictures, like, these kinds of type of maps and photos, but the destruction of like the mud flood or the ash mud or whatever that came into San Francisco, and that he showed that there was like kind of proof that there was like, big settlements in California before then the mud flood came and took them out, and that they actually built right back on top of the foundations of the previous.
That's very interesting that you would mention that, because today one of my very close research mates called Mike Oz, and you can find him on the Mud Flood and Hidden History Researchers Facebook group. He found this. Listen to this. St. John, New Brunswick. Canada's oldest incorporated city is St. John, New Brunswick. That distinction having been granted by an enthusiastic Governor Thomas Carleton on May 18th, 1785, and unreluctantly approved by the Colonial Office. This city also claims Champlain as its discoverer, June 24, 1604. So you realize it says Champlain was its discoverer, not even founder, which still would be something that's being found.
Yeah, it implies the city was there.
A city is only discovered if it was already there. This is from an official dark urban history review.
Fantastic. See
Yeah.
how it's all about the language. You have to watch the language that they use.
Just like in law.
Just like in law.
Yeah. Oh, not to get off on a tangent. Mike and I wanted to talk about ring cities today. So this is why we're starting at Rome, because it has a redoubt ring, or a ring structure around the inner city walls with redoubts. And Mike, if you could show some of them. Hard to make out, but still there.
You can see here, if you follow the mouse.
Yeah, there is a bastion.
That's your fortification.
Yep. show some of the other ones. And Mike, why do you think that they would use redoubts in a ring structure around an already fortified city?
The official narrative is that they were used for inundation, but I don't see how you inundate a city that's built on 7 hills.
No, that is I would agree.
It sort of defeats that given narrative by, yeah, sure, inundation could have been used, because if you look at a city like Amsterdam,
Yeah.
but just for remind this shape.
Yeah. That two bastion shape.
And we go and zoom out. We go to Amsterdam.
Yeah. There's a lot of readouts around Amsterdam.
The official narrative of Amsterdam,
Well, that's crazy.
is that it was used for inundation. So they could literally blow the dikes around these forts and then inundate everything around the old Star Fort of Amsterdam.
Why would that be useful?
Invading armies would have to march through about 40 to 60 centimeters of water. There was no way to determine canals or lakes or whatever. So that would really make it a struggle to get to the city.
Yeah. Could there be any other uses for it?
Probably. Distribution of water.
I'm thinking in the processes of agriculture.
Yes, inundate the land.
Yep.
Hey, did you guys see?
And refertilize it.
Yep.
I was watching a documentary about Mexico City and how the native people, the Aztecs, turned it into a lake and built their kind of city on it, and how they had, all kinds of aquaculture. They had all kinds of different plants growing in the water that they harvested.
I have a very awesome picture of that lake and city. I could perhaps share it quickly. You remember that one, Mike, where you see old Mexico City looking like Venice? And
maybe I have it.
Yeah, you may have it. Mexico City. And it's also funny that you mentioned Mexico City because Mexico City's inner wall was a ring of redoubts as well. There were, I think, 12 star forts in a ring around Mexico City once. And it's pretty amazing because they have no, official history to them as far as I have come across on the internet. I couldn't find them officially, all the 12 of them. I've only found them on old stamps. And so that means they are not claimed to be colonial necessarily. So that means they are built by the Mayans or the Mexicans or the Aztecs. And those tribes are, according to ethnologists in the 18th and 19th centuries, they are Tatar tribes originally. So
sorry, can't find that map.
Reading between the lines and doing one or two inferences, you can conclude that Tartarians built Mexico City and the Star Forts.
Yeah, and isn't there also, I was watching some stuff on a documentary like on YouTube that somebody had put out about, they showed old photos of, people in China that weren't, Chinese or Asian looking. Like,
Yeah.
they were white looking as well.
Yeah, and they also have the Uyghurs right now, which are a Tartarian tribe.
Right. Yeah.
And that's, something that's talked about a lot right now.
And when they decided to change what the cultural narrative was, and that they, said, okay, this is what Asian people look like, in Asia. and then they had the very round faces, you know, and yeah, so it's interesting, you know, that they constantly change the narrative of what they want us to see and believe.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Oh, so I found the map, guys. So you can, you know, if you really want to see, if you want to see Mexico
Yep.
City quickly, I have it up now, and we can talk about that lake, that artificial lake. Are you seeing what I'm seeing right now?
No.
I don't think you're sharing your screen yet.
I'm not. Oh, maybe I'm doing something wrong. Oh, yeah. Start screen sharing. Okay. So are you seeing it now?
There we go.
Yeah. Okay. So this is that lake, Bridget.
Oh, it has the Tartarian buildings, right? Because look, it has the antenna crosses with the globes.
Yep. And
And
but what is very interesting is that you have what seems to be white European people, and
yeah.
you have Greco-Roman style. You have an eagle, which is pretty much the symbol of Jupiter, and which would be of Europe. And then you have this weird looking antiquitech thing going on here, and this square looks like St. Mark's Square in
So
Venice.
that in tech, you know, thing that you were just pointing at, it looks like an old TV antenna from like the 60s
Yeah, what's that
that you
thing
would
going
put on your
on?
TV to get, you know, analog.
Oh yeah, right. That thing going around it.
Yeah,
You have
your
some.
TV, it
Yeah,
looked just like that.
yeah, that's true. Wow. Well, what I also like to point out is that this is from. I think this is depicted or publicized in the 1700s, but it's probably from an earlier date. And could you imagine living in one of these? I could.
Me, look at how beautiful it looks like. It would be so clean. Look at
Yeah.
how nice it is. Yeah. No, the thing is, and you know, people want to poo-poo these kinds of drawings, and it's like, but the people were they were drawing it as a picture, so they saw it and drew it. You know, it's the same
Or
thing with the
even
native
better.
people when they do pictures on rocks. What the thing is that they saw it and they drew it to record it,
Yeah.
and it
That's
makes
the
it historical fact.
that's Occam's razor, because to assume that they are trying to deceive or recording something else is having too many assumptions. So I would also, yeah, it's the most logical thing to deduce that they drew what they saw, or at least represented somehow what they saw in a drawing or visual thing. Yeah, so basically, yes, I'm
Do
agreeing with
you
you.
okay, so just a question. Do you guys think that they actually had running water in these buildings?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Just
Yeah,
for
I think we
a
can safely assume that every city was built on an aquifer.
Well, I can read from an article verbatim about Old Tartaria. Just a second. It will be within 10 seconds, this one. And they say that in the cities of Katai or Tartaria, there once were sewers perfectly and prodigiously contrived. So they are alluding to the Tartarians being the originators of plumbing. And the other official man who is afforded um, that credential is, what's the Moorish man's name that built Washington City? Benjamin Banneker. That is the guy who is afforded that title in the official history, you know, the father of plumbing. And he was a Moorish man living in America, and he was probably a Tatar.
Okay, so this is just real quick, and then I'll let you guys map. Because I
Yeah.
always have these questions, right? That, you know, go unanswered. No. Um, okay, so you always see that wealthy people, right, in the United States or people that are probably from Tartarian bloodline or whatever. So whenever these mud floods would come through, take out most of the cities or whatever, and they were unlivable, it seems like when they were re-inhabited, it's almost like these family lines came back to the area and then made a declaration on some of the buildings that were still standing
Yeah.
and then refurbished them. because
Yeah.
there's no real record of these people buying some of these Tartarian architectural buildings, right? They all of a sudden just kind of own them, and then their name is on them. They're owned. You know what I mean?
Well,
This,
what it seems to me what is happening is that there is an incorporation date for the city or for the structural building, and then there are renovation dates, and they just mix those dates around, and then they rename them as construction date or building date.
right. What,
That is
but the
what seems to me to be the most probable and logical solution to it.
but whoever owns it, they're usually wealthy, and there's no like when did they buy that building? You know
They're
what I
not
mean?
usually wealthy; they're usually Freemasons.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So they just kind of came in, took over those buildings, and then started to refurbish them, and they got the wealth out of them.
Yeah, and they also got to strip it of all the tales the buildings would tell, especially with its foundations and its inner technology. So they stripped the buildings of that to hide history and to accumulate wealth and technology for themselves.
Yeah, yeah, great. That's super. Okay, go ahead, guys. Sorry.
Yeah, let's go into what Mike is doing. Mike, did you have something to add about ring readouts?
Uh, I was just zooming in and out. I'm not sure if you're doing my screen share now,
Yeah, I stopped screen
but
sharing,
I
didn't I?
yeah,
Yeah, we have
basically
Mike's screen share now.
Yeah.
He's
these are a lot of the cities that I have marked as being ringed. Some of them are not ringed, but like it starts with Amsterdam. You have Utrecht, as you can see here.
So is there a ring city near star forts? Is that what's going on? Like maybe they were used together, like in some kind of technology, like water, and then you've got the star pattern thing that could, create a frequency,
Definitely
and then they use the water.
the canals connecting them. Every star fort has something to do with water.
We have only found very few forts that don't seem to, or we would have to go inside them to confirm the hydroelectric or the hydro thing going on with them. But at what Mike says is true. If even if you find them on peaks of mountains, our assumption is that they are built on a spring, like a natural fountain of water. You would need that. That is the most logical thing to do. I would do that. But yeah, Mike, do you think
Water
that?
is the source of life, right? Without water, there's no life. So it seems so very logical that you start building your city on top of an aquifer. What's
Yeah,
usually in the city center is a big cathedral,
yeah,
according to
or close to the center. And what you'll find in those cathedrals are, for instance, on its ceiling inside, you will find these knobs or protrusions coming from the roof. Those are ventilation shafts, and they're specifically for gas lighting. They can use the bad air and recycle it and burn it to get heat off of it. So they recycle the burnt gas from the gas lamps into heat and actually also electricity, according to some. So very interesting system, and that ties in with Philip Drushinin's gas mining
yes,
thesis, let's say. Yeah, because it also seems that they were mining gas underneath them, so you would have water support and gas support from them. So like an HVAC system, like a central infrastructure that supplies water, heat, and gas, and also perhaps communication. Because what I also find is that these structures are connected with commerce. It's documented in the history of civil engineering from the 1700s that um, they were commerce structures built for communication. And communication means a lot of things. Commerce can also mean a lot of things broadly. Mediumship is commerce and communication, and basically a lot of metaphysics is about communication or interaction between things. So this whole concept of communication can tie into a lot of things, but I'm thinking that they could communicate by signaling either with radio or telegraphy from these forts. I found a lot of these star forts are called signal forts, and the lines connecting them are called sometimes communication lines. And inside the star forts are some things called communication galleries. And it's really hard for us to find out what they were used for and why they call them communication galleries or communication lines. So it's basically hard for us to find out why they have done that, and we're theorizing over it, and we sure need help. There's a lot to go.
Yeah. Well, didn't you? Oh, so two things. I'm watching these star fort maps that, Michael's putting up. And it's kind of interesting, like, when he's way up and then he kind of goes down. But even before you get to these forts or rings, you can see patterns really high up
Yes.
of
Yeah,
how they're
definitely.
designed from way up, how the city's designed. And you know what some of these star forts remind me of is, Emoto, the Japanese researcher guy who would
Yes.
talk to water and then the water would have those crystalline structures.
Mm-hmm.
And then some of these patterns look to me like those cymatic sound patterns, like when you bounce a frequency onto a
Are you
thing and
aware?
they put this salt on it and then it creates a design. That's how some of these patterns look too.
Are you aware of the Global Vision channel?
Yeah, no, I love that guy.
His latest video, he basically shows how they designed star forts by sound.
Oh, I haven't seen that one. I'm gonna have to go look. But yeah, so I mean, and it just reminds me of those crystals too, like the ice crystals from Emoto,
Yep.
because he would play some of them that were really amazing, like those Starfort ones were symphonies, by like Mozart and Beethoven and things like that, that those crystals would form that way in ice. Maybe I should listen to
Do
more
I have
Mozart and
those here?
Beethoven. It might be
Yeah,
helpful for my health.
my father, who I can also admit is a Freemason in Denmark, and although I rejected Freemasonry, he played Mozart and Beethoven when I was a kid, and I think it worked. I hope it worked, but I'm thinking that there's definitely something to that, and I'm gonna do that with my kid.
It's just
Good on you.
amazing. It's amazing that, yeah, good on you. Look at even circles like that one you're looking at. It has one in the middle and it has all like a circle of them around, even from way far, far away. How do you guys think that they did this? Do you think, blimps? They floated around in blimps and
That's
looked?
my guess by now that they used something like blimps,
Well,
the
in the
dirigibles.
yeah, in the Vedas, they talk about different kinds of aircraft. And
Vimanas, yeah.
yeah, well, no, they also have the Vimanas. They have another one, I can't remember the word for it. And they also have what they describe as floating continents or land masses.
Yeah, definitely. And even in the 1800s, before the Wright brothers, there was an Indian guy who designed the first aeroplane out of bamboo and using mercury somehow in an unknown principle that caused levitation. And the funny thing, if you go into our very good friend Exertus on YouTube, he made a recent video about aviation where he discusses the questions about aviation, and he talks about the official narrative is slightly changing about aviation and how flight actually occurs or can occur. And they're seriously suggesting that there is some sort of, let's say,
Oh,
anti-gravity
look at
principle.
that. Look at that map. I'm sorry, Victor. This map just blew my lid off.
Yeah, I
Look at it,
know.
because you see all those star forts that go around like a half circle all the way around the city.
And the excuse is they give you is that this is a siege map. So the forts around the city are built to siege the town.
But look at that weird circle, a sun. There's like a sun glyph around the little city there in the middle. You see on the edge they has a sun glyph. It's like built around the city on the edge. Has
You
the
mean
points. Has like
The
this point.
the astrological sign of the sun, like a circle with a dot in it.
No, well this one looks like a sun. It's around the roadway system. See where the roadway system is? And then around that on the edge it has like a sun pattern with the flames coming off of it. Kind of a look.
Hmm.
Yeah, in there where the hand just went. Where all the roads are. There's a whole bunch of roads there
here?
together. No, in the main city. In the
In the
main
main.
city. Yeah. So on the edge there on the right hand side, you can see, well, I mean, it's a star fort edge on there, but it kind of looked like a sun glyph if it went all the way around. Pharaoh. Kind of remind me of Pharaoh stuff. Anyway.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I could see that.
Yeah. You see what I'm saying? If it would have
Yeah.
went in a circle, it would have been. I wonder what deterred him from doing that.
Yeah.
Anyway. Cool
Uh,
maps. These are
Mike, if you
awesome.
could, Mike, if you could go back just a second. I wanted to get this point across. Mikey mentioned that the official story for these ring fortification is that to siege a star fort city, you need to build star forts. So, to fight star forts, you need star forts. Yeah, go into the meme, Mike. Fight star forts with star forts. Yes, that is basically it.
That's hysterical.
Yeah, if we're to believe that a star fort is very hard to build and also to siege, if we're presupposing the military narrative, then would you go to great lengths in the heat of war and in a foreign country
Build a
to
fort.
build forts just to siege it? It just like on face value, it seems ridiculous.
What we're going to do is throw up an earthen wall that will last for hundreds of years.
Yeah, with stone carefully crafted in ornate styles. Why would you need this geometry, this perfect geometry, just to be in a trench and
Yeah.
wait out like in the First World War, where it's just like this huge waiting game.
Well, and this is the other thing too. I mean, we know for a fact, I mean, it's pretty much mainstream at this point that we can't build some of the stuff that's been built before. Now,
Yep. No one seems to think about that you just mentioned. I tell my parents and my closest, the people I'm close to, every time we pass like a very ornate large building, I say, "Oh yeah, you remember we can't build this anymore."
that's
So
super funny.
yeah. I think it's funny because like we're so prideful of our current civilization. We take pride in all the technological developments and all this stuff, and we just whistle past the graveyard when it comes to pyramids and huge cathedrals, Gothic cathedrals, and stuff like that. I think the building of La Sagrada Familia in Barcelona is really to install in people's minds that they are able to build these if they want to, and they also need you to believe that it takes 2 centuries to do so, and they're still doing it, right? Yeah, it's just ridiculous, most of it.
So there was this other guy, while we're looking at this, that had a theory on YouTube, and he was showing like video footage like from really, really long time ago, maybe like 1860s or something. I have no idea. But because he was showing that they were trying to prove to us that there were people way back then. He said, but a lot of this footage that you find, it's just a few people at like a fourth of, or, like a big gathering, but there's never really that many people dressed up. It's almost like the elite or whoever moved back into those areas, like were starting the process of hiding, you know what I mean, concealing information and making us think that there were lots of people
Yep.
in some of these areas, and there weren't very few actually.
Yeah, and there's a distinct lack of children in those old.
Yeah, that's what he said. And you're
Yeah.
like, "Oh my God." So, yeah, so these are people that, either survived the mud flood or relocated after because they knew, or left for a period and then came back to the area, survived
Mm,
it somehow, and then carry on because there are no children.
yep. And also another explanation could be that you're just witnessing recently moved in people, and they're actually getting to the process of breeding now. You're witnessing like the moments where all the adults moved into the city are starting to produce kids,
I'm just
and
so
they haven't been made yet, so to speak.
yeah, it's just a trip what we don't know, and we take it fast face value. It's almost
Some
like mind
also,
control. The images that they show us
yeah.
like get stuck in our brain, and it causes our belief system. So it's even an unverbalized belief system,
Yeah,
with
I needed another explanation. Sorry to hijack that, but another possible explanation for the lack of kids could be that the kids, when they are filming, are working inside the factories, all of them. So they're not out.
uh
Yeah, or maybe they're being indoctrinated underground or something. They're definitely not in the pictures or the photos. There's a lack of them. So where are they? Are they simply not been made yet, or are they somewhere else where they're not filming, or is there something else going on?
so I have a question. So every map, especially these newer ones, these Google Map Earth ones, and you have these little star forts mapped out, and then there's this like circle, and then there's one in the middle. Do you think that the outside edge ones, they could produce enough energy that then they could transfer it or kind of connect it to the middle one, and then the energy could reach, broad, you could have electricity over a broad area?
This is most likely the case, yes.
Hmm. Yeah, and they also, if you watch Global Vision, he will show you how they use these stacking principles, where they stack the layers of perfectly laid out geometry, and that is a amplification of the wave. So they have these waveguide systems
Oh, that
building.
that church right there has a big old story that they like to sell you. I forget. I remember I saw a movie that they did on that cathedral where it took
But
the guy.
many,
They
are
were
you
still
sure it's
building
this
on it
one?
after the guy. Well, the story was the guy was in this town. They decided to build it. I forget what the main story was, and then he decided to design it into a cross. But then he was building on it his whole life, and then after he died, they were still building onto it.
Yeah, that goes into what I just mentioned about La Sagrada Familia, and how they have to, impress upon your minds that it takes a lifetime to build and plan, and that our civilization did do this.
It looks like a machine. It looks
Yeah.
like, doesn't that building look like a machine?
Yeah, if you look at those buttresses, they are very. They have those flying buttresses. I think they're called flying buttresses. But yeah, this is La Sagrada Familia. They're still constructing it, and Gaudi, when he died, supposedly it was only not even a quarter made. Not even 25% completed, and they have been constructing it ever
That's a
since.
power plant. That thing looks like a power plant. Doesn't it
Yeah.
look? That's what it looks like. It looks like a power plant. Like if you look at it from a little bit above and you don't look at the detail, it looks like something that they would build to put like in a computer or attach other wires to, like at
Yeah.
a power plant.
It looks like even like a nuclear power plant, some like with those cones.
Yeah,
Looks like,
serious.
but yeah, I can totally see that from above. It kind of looks like a power plant. But what is also interesting about Barcelona is, yeah, the city grid on it. Very interesting city grid it has with these square buildings and square roads. Very interesting crit. But yeah, let's go back to the ring cities again and inundation maps.
It's
Mike,
more like the cathedrals is a good indication of the city having been a star, because they all have that cross-shaped design, as you can see.
So that, I mean, so the cathedrals were generating some kind of power, right? So these people that have lots of wealth and who have control over power systems and stuff like that, I mean, they've been using these cathedrals and things like that to kind of hold the power, right? I mean, because those cathedrals, they look like, when you look at them from way above, those things look like they can house or generate, like the power can get sent to those things, and then they hold energy for like a period of time or something,
now
like a
you're
battery.
talking about power as in, physical, electrical power. But what is a synonym for that? That is political power. And if you
Right.
think about the legal system and legalese and the political words we use, we go into polls and vote for politicians to put them in charge.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are all denoting an electrical system of power. And I have a book here besides me called Babylon's Bangers by Joseph Farrell. And he argues and documents in that book that ancient priests were radio interpreters. They were sending signals with the churches. And you can basically redefine all the church terms to mean something, having to do something with electricity or radio. And that's very,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
Joseph
Wow.
Farrell,
What's
Babylon's
that book?
Bangers.
What was that book
Joseph,
again?
Joseph Farrell, Babylon's Bangers. Very interesting book. I have it right here. I did a lot of. It's called The Alchemy of Deep Physics, High Finance, and Ancient Religion. So he goes into how churches were used as a form of dark magic. And he goes into what he calls architectural warfare, wherein basically every hidden reason for a war will have to do with ancient architecture and destroying those structures or remodeling them or hiding them. Something to do with ancient architecture seems to be, according to Joseph Farrell, the biggest reasons for war. So yeah, I'm trying to find right now a few passages about radio interpretation of churches. So, Mike, do you think that the ring cities there were more of them, or are we seeing?
What you're seeing right now on the map is the ringed cities that I've mapped out, because most of the rest of the star forts are off.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure that an area like Germany hides a lot more ringed cities, like Berlin here.
Yeah.
Berlin was a big star fort. This was the center of it. I can actually show you an old map of that.
Yeah, Berlin. I've seen some maps of that very large star fort. And there's a lot of talk about the Tiergarten or the zoological garden in Berlin. But yeah. But yeah, I found some.
Wow, look at that. And it has two waterways kind of running through it, right? I mean, or like a square one. They were generating some big power from Berlin.
This is what Tiergarten is.
A Tiergarten?
So
it almost looks like a church.
That's Tiergarten is zoo.
Yeah, it is.
And as far as I'm aware, this is the giraffe building, if I'm not mistaken.
But yeah, I could just finish my point about Joseph Farrell's radio churches.
Oh my
So
God. Yeah, go ahead. I just on that last photo with the how the circle was in the middle of the roads. I just kind of had this thing where, they're driving towards that circle in the middle of the road in that zoo forest thing. And by the driving of people going in and out of those areas and around that circle ring, I mean, that's generating a lot of power to that center point, right? Even a car driving on that road could do that. That could
yeah,
be harnessed, right?
all depends on how they would harness that. Yeah. So how smart are they at harnessing such mechanical power?
But
Is the
the thing
question.
is, it's an acupuncture needle in the middle. They drove around it and the roads came into it. And with acupuncture, just from my end of it, because that's one of the things I do, is that you can shift if you're good at what you do and you put in, like, you could just, in two needles, you could just shift a person's whole body.
Mm, yeah. So I guess that those subtle energy grids could
Yeah.
mean a whole lot. Yeah, I get your point.
Okay, so read us some Joseph Farrell.
Okay. So Joseph Farrell, he talks about this scientists and something called paleophysics. I'll just read a bit. One scientist who tackled this problem very directly is German physicist and engineer Professor Dr. Ing Konstantin Mehl, Meyl. Mehl is the author of probably the only comprehensive and highly mathematical textbook treatment of the production of such scalar or longitudinal waves in the medium. So he's talking about scalar waves, and that ties into global vision and what Mike and Nathan and I have been researching with the waveguide systems of Starforts. So I'll carry on. The title of Mail's book, all 655 pages of it, is Scalar Waves from an Extended Vortex and Field Theory to a Technical, Biological, and Historical Use of Longitudinal Waves. For the technically and mathematically minded, this book is a thorough introduction to the theory and practice of scalar waves, if one can get through the sometimes shaky English translation. So, Mail is a scientist who very deliberately and consciously set out to reconstruct an underlying physics basis, what I have called paleophysics in my various books on ancient history and texts, from ancient myths, texts, and temples, um, and his program, as outlined in the final pages of his book, is a total one. For example, he produces the following table as a summary of his particular way of decoding the ancient temples and mysteries. So I'll go through some of his definition. An ancient temple equals a shortwave station. Dedicated to one god means fixing of the frequency. Supreme God Zeus, father of all God, means range of the shortwave and all shortwave bands. Priests, or representative of God, equals amateur radio operator with license to transmit. High priest equals chief intendant. Pontifex Maximus, topmost bridge builder, means chairman of the authority and the telegraph offices. So think about law, Bridgette. So the
Oh
Pontifex
my God,
Maximus,
that's a mind-blowing book. I'm gonna have to get that book.
yeah,
I'm
an oracle is a telegraphy receiver. Runes cuneiform writing equals telegraphy symbols. A meter or hexameter equals increase of redundancy. So these are all radio terms. I'm hoping I'm not, this is not going over too many people's heads. But basically, this guy, Mail, the German physicist, argues that all these structures were definitely way more technical than we can even begin to comprehend.
Wow. So can you send me, I mean, if you get a moment, when you have a moment, can you send me the both of those people's a link, if you can find a link to those people's works so that I can make sure and get
Yeah. Well,
Mail and
I can
Joseph
spell out
Farrell.
that Joseph Farrell is a Joseph with a Joseph, and Farrell is with a F and double R and double L. So Farrell,
Okay.
Joseph P. Farrell, and yeah, he the book's title is called Babylon's Bankers. But I'll get you a link as well.
Yeah, thanks so much. I just talk about some mind-blowing work. Woo,
Yeah.
woo, woo, woo.
Right now,
Okay,
we're
so
also seeing Mike's mind-blowing work.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I'm
So Mike,
just going in. I'm zooming in and I'm zooming out and I'm showing the people what's what.
yeah, those are these readout ring structures. But Mike, we've discussed inundation. What do you really think that these were for? Do you buy the official explanation?
Well, if they were used for inundation, which is well possible, right? In some cases, I mean, Poland, Germany, the Netherlands, all fairly low-lying areas. I wouldn't be surprised if they could inundate the lands, especially if you have a river to serve you. But
So
would that be used for war purposes? Nah.
doubtful, but
Sorry,
it's
that's all I have to say about the war purposes of Star Forts by now. Nah.
yeah.
that's
But
funny.
but to say the least, right? It would make more sense that all the star forts were used as defense structures with inundation techniques rather than imagining that you build all these pointy points to trap soldiers in concentrated areas around the fort to shoot them down. That is just the utmost. It's just ridiculous.
Hey,
I sound like a broken record, but when you see all the old pictures of wars in and around Star Forts, that never happens. The invading armies, they just run over forts from because most of the forts are with 45-degree angles slope, so they can actually run. They can scale them pretty easily. So they just do that, and they breach them pretty quickly. And if they can't, they just surround the fort and wait for them to starve. It's really useless as a defense structure because
It's
it's
very
easy to
dumb.
single out. Yeah, and you can scale it pretty easily. It would be much more useful to have an old castle with like water around it and with a very high wall with no angle and no slopes to it. That is the most useful structure for that, and not like a 45-degree angle low-lying star fort that could be easily breached by more than 100 men and would be hard to defend.
yeah, no, I remember when I was a kid, in the US, we have Sesame Street, and there
Yeah.
was always this, what was it? Yeah, it could have been, yeah, Sesame Street. And I remember from when I was a little kid, there was this little song on Sesame Street, and I use it a lot. I say it a lot on radio and stuff. And it basically was saying something like, which one of these things doesn't go together? Which one of these things doesn't belong? And I always remember that because it kind of set me up to think about what doesn't go together. You know what I mean? What's going on here? Um, and a lot of people never even caught that in their thinking. You know what I mean? To be able to think that way, like, pick out things that don't go together or see a bigger picture or see like a larger pattern. I think people are sometimes are so fixated on their one point in their life that if they just expanded a little bit, that they would see things that would, change their whole concept, of what is really going on here.
Mm, yeah, I'll agree.
So this is kind of an interesting thing. I'm just going to throw it out there because, I work in alternative medicine and I have worked in medicine and just coming from kind of that kind of a standpoint to this kind of stuff. Um, so one of the things I come from some lineages of, like shamanic people and old kind of healing bloodlines. And so I've been practicing and I study shamanism um, and different types of shamanism, like across the globe, but more of like the really deep, deep stuff, right? And there is the old, a lot of it, like they say that it comes from 10,000 years ago in South America. And it comes from two specific lineages. One is the Yaqui and one is the Toltec, even though the Toltec one's kind of been washed out, but the Yaqui one.
Yeah.
So
Well, I
one of
keep
the,
reading that the Toltecs were the most ancient of those tribes, and they were basically killed off by the Aztecs.
yeah, well, because of, but anyway, so when we go back to like really ancient types of shamanism work in South America, they call it sorcery, right? And if you go to the Bible and what they tell the mainstream, the worst possible thing on earth is sorcery, because that's what they declare to the main public in the Bible. The one thing about these shamans or sorcerers of South America was that they had a lot of their concepts, or the concepts that have been shared to me by my teachers, right? They
Yeah.
talk about how you learn these practices go back like 10,000 years. A lot of them are movements that actually keep your power and your energy in your field and your body. So the whole outline basically of this type of shamanism that I've been studying for years is that I generate my own power by using the environment around me and myself. That's how I keep my field. You can live